people that I study environmental history, I'm often met with a skeptical, "Oh, I didn't even know you could study that." And honestly, I don't blame them. When I first started working on climate issues, I often felt a bit out of place as a historian. I thought I maybe needed to be more of like a scientist or an economist to really make an impact. And this makes sense because the climate crisis is often phrased as a future-oriented problem. It's often phrased as a problem of future technologies, future innovations, a future generation. So it felt counterintuitive for me to be rummaging in the past for answers. Yet I persisted. It's because of the community I came from. I come from Miami, Florida, in a predominantly Black and immigrant community. For me, I grew up with people who really did care about the environment. Not just because of the climate crisis, which we saw unfolding in front of us, let it be with hurricanes, erosion, and flooding, but because our communities were also facing legacies of environmental injustice, let it be through racial segregation, as well as food deserts. So when I looked at the great environmentalist movement, I was really surprised to see a lack of representation of our voices and our stories. So I decided to look more into the history of our connections with the environment. And surprisingly, I found a job that allows me to do a little bit of both, a little bit of that future-oriented work, as well as looking into the past. Today, I work with Black Girl Environmentalists, where I run the Hazel M. Johnson Fellowship in its inaugural year. We're working with 14 talented fellows from across the United States who are Black women and gender-expansive people who are emerging climate leaders. We place them at top competitive internships, like at RARE. We give them a fair wage, a generous stipend, and professional development opportunities. And I honestly feel so grateful to be able to shape emerging climate leaders. And I get to look at the past a little bit. This amazing woman behind me is the namesake of this fellowship, Hazel M. Johnson. She was an environmental activist in the 1970s in the south side of Chicago. She started after her husband passed away from lung cancer, and she noticed her children had persistent health issues with respiratory and skin ailments. So Hazel decided to do some digging. She knew that her community, which was a predominantly Black and low-income community, was sandwiched between high-polluting industries. She lived by a landfill, sewage waste management treatment centers, as well as industrial factories. And as Hazel does some more digging, she finds that her community of the south side of Chicago had some of the highest rates of cancer in all of the state of Illinois. And her community was also being fed toxic waters from Chicago. So Hazel decided to get organized. She created the People for Community Recovery, where they challenged the city of Chicago for better environmental and living conditions for some of their poorest community members. Today, we all benefit from Hazel's work, yet I can bet that not many of you guys have ever heard of her. And in my research, I find that that's actually a persistent problem in the environmentalist movement. Though communities of color consistently are contributing to this movement, we're rarely recognized and remembered. And I always found that to be a little bit ironic. Even before scientists were able to concretely link fossil fuel burning with greenhouse gases and global warming, communities of color had been fighting fossil fuel industries for decades. Let it be Native American communities in North America and South America who were opposing oil expansion on their indigenous lands, as well as poor white communities in the Appalachia region who were coal miners and have had persistent issues with Black lung, were consistently fighting for better environmental and labor conditions, to poor Black communities in urban spaces who deeply connected with environmental issues as a continuation of racial segregation and violence. So for us, this issue of environment isn't just one thing. It's deeply connected to these other issues. If anything, the climate crisis isn't a new issue for us. It's actually almost a legacy issue that is compounding different impacts in histories. So when we're confronting the environmentalist movement, a perspective that is only based on bicycling and maybe being a vegetarian, polar bears, is absolutely important, of course. And when you're talking about communities who are already facing environmental injustices, it just may not be as salient. And for us, especially when the environmental movement has been historically very shy to discuss some of the issues that we believe are interconnected. And And we still continue to fight these issues today, but once again, within those intersections. So for example, we have Native American communities as they fought against the Dakota pipeline, access pipeline. For Native American communities, that wasn't just a climate issue or a fossil fuel issue, it was also a question of land sovereignty and respecting sacred lands. For land defenders in South America who are protecting the Amazon, it's not just about conservation, it's also looking at conserving their traditional ways of life. For the people of the Congo who are currently in crisis, fighting against extractivist industries is also looking at how do they protect their ancestral lands, their ways of life, and human dignity. And for urban Black communities, this question is also looking at fighting histories of segregation, pollution, and food deserts. For us, it's deeply interconnected. And we consistently challenge the environmentalist movement on that. But oftentimes we're met with this question of, I think we need to focus. I think we need to focus on just this issue, and by looking at race and colonialism, we might get lost. And we find that, and I think something I've become really hopeful about when running this program is that the young climate activists that I've been working with from diverse communities are challenging that narrative. They're saying this is how we focus. We can't solve the climate issues if we're not looking at the intersectional issues that are coming along with it. And I think I'm so proud to see that. I think when I was looking at the applications, we had over 200 applications. We honestly expected 80. We were truly blown away to see that to see young climate activists seeing environment not just as one issue, but as deeply interconnected, and are really excited to move on that. So in many ways, as I continue to work with young people, and let it be through this internship and many other programming that we do at Black Girl Environmentalists, I find that we're creating a generation of environmentalists who are excited to fight the climate crisis, but also bring their communities along. And I think the question for environmentalist organizations isn't just, okay, how do I bring communities of color, poor communities into the environmentalist movement, but honestly, sometimes, how do I catch up? Because we have been discussing these issues, whether you've recognized this or not. And as you guys continue to invest in young climate leaders of color, climate leaders from low-income communities and underrepresented communities, invest not only in their stories, but also in their solutions, they promise you we will bring our communities along with us into this movement. Thank you.